Good afternoon, everyone. So I guess we are the last panel, so the pressure is on us before the drink starts, right? Okay, I'll give a minute for people to settle in before we start. Okay. How many of you were there on the first speaker series today morning? Tony's?
Just a couple, it looks like.
Just a couple? Okay.
Me too.
If you remember one of the phrases he mentioned about success in aviation, he talked about right business model, right cost model, and right people. So, ladies and gentlemen, this last forum is on people. So I have 3 panelists, and I would like them to introduce themselves, because as you hear, one of the key phrases here, inclusiveness, inclusivity, and inclusiveness starts with I. Why don't we talk about I first and include you later? So Uschi, a little bit about your background and for us to know you, and tell us one person or 2 persons who really influenced your career, whom you think kind of fit into this leadership trait.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Uschi Schulte-Sasse. My background is in computer science and business administration. I grew up on airports all over Europe. So my dad's a pilot, my sister's a flight attendant. The whole family is into aviation. And now heading the aviation division at Inform. I have about 250 staff members that report to me. And yeah, very happy to be here. And the person that influenced me most and my career is my former CEO. And his big competency was to believe in people, no matter what gender, what color, what background they had. He believed and he trusted people, and that's what I took with me and what I try to do for my people as well.
Thank you. Chris?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here with you. I'm Chris Carter. I'm the director of the Asia Pacific region for the FAA. We have a number of regions around the world. We divided the world into 3 regions, and so we've got 3 directors around the world. I happen to be the director here in Singapore for the Asia Pacific region. I'm an engineer by background. I went to Embry-Riddle, got an engineering degree in aeronautical engineering. I'm also an MBA, so I've got a business background to some extent. I started my career, a little bit about me, first of all. I've also lived around the world. I grew up in 3 different countries. I grew up in India, Saudi Arabia, and the UK. So I have a little bit of diversity just in the way I grew up. I lived in a lot of international communities. I also, of course, after that, migrated to the US. I've been in the US for many, many years, more than I care to think. As you can see from the gray hair, it's been a little while now. I started my career in industry before I came to the regulator. I'm probably the only regulator here. I walked around before this panel and talked to a number of people. Didn't find too many other people that are regulators, a lot of industry. So just from that perspective, I guess I'm unique here too. Yeah, so as far as people, like I said, I was in industry before I came to the FAA. And, in the US, I worked in a company in the middle of the country, which is very, very cornfield, and a lot of most people, as is today in aviation, the companies were run by, a white male demographic. And I came up the corporate ranks, and I found that I had a champion in the vice president of the company, and he was just looking for the best people in the best role. And that really impressed me from a diversity perspective, because he himself was a native of the Midwest of the US. And so for someone like that to come out of that region was kind of unique to me. And he was much younger than me. He was, I considered him kind of a kid, actually, but very unique. And that was extremely impressive. And so that has stuck with me for since then. And so hopefully you'll learn a little more about me as we go around, but I think that's enough for an introduction.
Thank you, Chris.
Oh, over to me.
May?
Yeah.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Yin May. I'm from Malaysia Aviation Group. I look after the group branding and customer experience stream. I think a little bit background, I've been in the aviation industry, or rather specifically in Malaysia Airlines, for about 20 years now. But to be honest, in the middle of it, I actually did leave Malaysia Airlines, and I went out and do a couple of other industries. So in that sense, I had my diverse experience in different industries. I think what kind of prompted me to be somewhat like my sponsor, as opposed to, I think I had the brunt on the other side of the unfairness of diversity and inclusivity. So I think that it happened during my college days. Yeah, because I studied overseas, and being not from that country itself, I had that brunt from that side. So I told myself, note to self, never ever do that to anyone else. And I think since then, for the 30 years thereafter, I made it a point to make sure that whatever I do, is to appreciate and respect the diversity that we have, and hence this is a topic very close to my heart.
Thanks. May. So we talked about a little bit about diversity and leadership in general. And a couple of decades, all of us within aviation industry or industry in general, when I look at companies, the way the companies used to put their vision statement, couple of decades back, it used to be increase shareholders' value. Then they come into customer centricity. And then I think the new trait that's coming up is people first, what you are doing in terms of employees and so forth. And that's where we flip into the leadership trait. Again, that word leadership has been there for generation after generation, but the new term that's adding on to that leadership, the inclusiveness part, is probably a word for this decade. And I asked one example from you. Do you think inclusive leaders are rare, and what defines them?
From my perspective, I do believe we still have too less inclusive leaders, definitely. Why am I saying that? Because I still think that there are a lot of leaders out there that don't strive for diversity and don't strive to be inclusive. And for me, I think inclusive leadership is not only a conscious decision that you're taking, but it's a business requirement. For me, it's something like, we're in the aviation division. Where do you find more diversity than in aviation, where we're a global business, we're around the world. We come from all continents, from all backgrounds, all colors, all religions, all sexes, all experiences. We're so broad in the amount of experience that we could have, but we don't always see it. So I think we need inclusive leadership to represent not only our customers, but also all of our employees. So it's something where at Inform, at my company, in the aviation division, we have over 20 different nationalities. And I believe that it is important, because it is important that we're able to experience how people think differently, what backgrounds they have, from which areas they come from, because that brings different perspectives together, different points of view that you can then incorporate into doing business, into being kind and respectful to your employees, but also to your customers. And I think it's very, very important to reflect that in the way that you work in leadership and towards your customers.
Thank you. Chris, any specific trait you define?
Yeah, I do think that inclusive, and I mentioned the example during my opening about the person who I felt was a champion for me. I do think that to be an inclusive leader, the first thing, there's a lot of cliches and phrases around that people like to put on. They sell magazines and they look nice on brochures and things like that. But I think the important thing for any inclusive leader is to recognize that everybody, including yourself, myself, we all have biases. Mm-hmm. It's to be aware of those biases and to recognize that you can manage those biases. Again, going back to the example that I mentioned about the leader, what I ended up seeing in that company was, and I said this as we were all talking about our experience offline, is that, I felt that that leader did a great job of building a mosaic. If you think of a mosaic with all the different colors, the sparkling colors, right? He built a really good mosaic of people, pronouncing the colors brightly. So in other words, we like to, again, another cliche, in the US, we like to use a cliche that, hey, we're a melting pot, or it's, we're a mix of all the colors. When you mix all the colors and overlap, you just get a yucky color that you don't understand what it is, right? But if you take all the colors and put them in a place and accentuate the beauty of each color, you end up with a beautiful mosaic. And I feel like that's what this leader that I thought was a great leader did in the company that I was at. I thought he did a great job of constructing a mosaic of a leadership team where we all played off each other and relayed, and we knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we were willing to help each other and work with each other, and we knew when to step in and when not to step in, and things like that. And so I thought that he created a great example of a model, a mosaic, if you like, of a leadership team. And so to me, I think if I leave you with a thought on the characteristics of an inclusive leader, it's to not say, I'm colorblind, I don't see color, right? It's okay to see the color. It's okay to see the differences. It's okay to recognize that you have your own biases, but manage them. I think that's the key takeaway for an inclusive leader. It's to say, how do I manage those biases to give me the best out of this team?
And I think I would have to really agree with that. On top of just being a mosaic, I think it's about knowing it's a conscious effort. Let us be honest, right? It is not something that will come naturally. Like it or not, inclusive leaders, it's a conscious effort. We need to intentionally put it in the culture that we build, right? Even starting from the point of designing an office. Your design of the office needs to be inclusive. For example, when we talk about diversity, it's not the common areas of race, color, it's also related to size, is related to age as well. It's even related to, say, moms, pregnant moms, or even moms who are breastfeeding. So if you take that example of your design of your office, you need to be inclusive to say, look, I need to include the potential mothers who are breastfeeding and make sure that I make space for them, right? So it starts even from then to recruitment, and not just about when you get the people in. You need to make sure that you set a culture which is always allowing everybody to know that they're treated fairly, they're respected for who they are as a person, not because of their color, age, or experience, or socioeconomic background, or so on, but everybody will get a fair share in terms of what their voices and their contribution. And to that, what you say, mosaic, I would add to that and say, it literally, seeing the different colors will make you 1 + 1 is not 2, right? Literally, you will be able to do 1 + 1 equals to 3, 5, or even 10. Yeah, you get different combination of perspective that literally makes your product, makes your company a much better proposition. Yeah.
Very, very interesting thought process, because when we talk about leadership, we talk about inclusiveness, and that phrase of unbiased or don't have any conscious bias, unconscious bias comes in very straight. And what I'm hearing from the panel is it's okay to have biases. Be conscious about it. And very, very strong thought on this. Now we are here for an inclusive panel, and we can't be inclusive if our audience don't contribute to this discussions. Before we get into the next question, any thought or anything you want to share? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, sure. I think we are getting a mic.
Is the mic
We have
here?
one right here.
Here, there is one here, I think.
Just take that one.
Oh my God. Thank you. Ken?
Now?
Yes,
Yep.
Yes,
very
okay.
loud. Yes.
Hi, good evening. So first of all, really appreciate the point of view on being aware of your biases, because I think it's irrational and untrue to think that anyone is devoid of bias. So really appreciate that thought. It's actually a question not necessarily to the four of you, but something I've been wondering since this morning. I've been attending all these discussions and talks, and this is the first female panel I'm seeing today. And I'm really wondering why. So I know this question is probably more for the organizers, but also perhaps a bit to you, Moushumi, since your organization is a part of the team here. Not to put you on the spot, but I do feel that, and it's something that's been on my mind the entire day, that, and the panel before you was like 6 men on the panel, and I'm thinking, there's a lot of women in aviation and hospitality and travel and tourism. Why aren't they up here? So what thoughts from all of you on that?
Well, this question came in second time in last 4 days. The first one came last Friday when we were doing it internal meeting, and someone put a org chart of a airline, and they said, oh, why there is so less female touch points in our customer base. So that's, and your second question. Just to add, for the keynote speakers, this panel, yes, I observed the same fact, but we have at least 4 to 5 other conferences, and there were quite a number of female panelists, and I think, I'm sure Yin May was in one of the speaker sessions also. Unfortunately, we didn't bring many here, and that's feedback, and very strong feedback. I like feedback for our organizer teams.
But I think I'll add to that as well, right? I mean, let's call a spade a spade. I think in the aviation industry, like it or not, it is really male-dominated. Right? And within MAG itself, MAG is Malaysia Aviation Group. You know, we have 4 airlines, we have our aviation services, and so on. I will tell you this: we have only 20% representation, female representation, in the entire organization, and it differs between the different levels. If we talk about top level, we are just about 16%, which I believe is actually pretty good. It exceeds the industry average. But as you go down, our senior, our managers and above, we have about pretty good spread, about 48, 43%. But then overall, we only have about 20. So I think this is where Malaysia Aviation Group has committed to say, you know, we are with the IATA, the 25 by 2025, to make sure that we have a 25% female representation by 2025. So that doesn't give us a lot of time. We just have 2 more years to go. We are currently at 20%, so we need 5% more to reach that target. Yeah, so wish us luck.
Quite close. It brings up very interestingly to our next phase. So we started with inclusiveness, inclusive leadership, and so forth. And when I talk about inclusivity and diversity, these are like the 2 faces of the coin. One cannot go without the other. You can't bring in a sustainable diversity unless you have inclusivity. as an organization, and it's a little soft topic, and excuse me if there are any HR in the audience, is companies focusing too much on diversity metrics instead of inclusivity?
I don't think they are, or at least from my experience, and I can't speak for all of the companies, but I think it doesn't help to focus on diversity if you don't have inclusive leaders, because your people will leave again. So you can't retain the people if they don't feel at home.
Yeah.
So if HR brings in all these diverse people, but if the leaders are not inclusive, they will not stay. So it's in vain to do that. So they go hand in hand, and they have to go hand in hand. So also inclusive leaders want to have a diverse team. So I think it's something that we should all look into, like acting upon, and really trying to have a diverse team, no matter in which area, if it's gender or background where people come from. And I mean, I know the struggle, because in my team, we're IT. So IT is mostly male dominant. I have 26% women, 26.3, something like that. It's totally too less, but I can't find people. I do not find people that actually apply for jobs. And we're going into schools, we're having girls' days in the companies, we're having girls' app camps for programming when they're teenagers. We're really trying to be active in the community where the company is based to get people in, but it is a difficult thing. It's not easy.
It's not.
Actually, that just provoked a thought, right? You think about it. So if that issue that you're facing, most likely it resides in a community, and their upbringing, right? You need to have more female going into educational areas like engineering and like IT, right? I think historically, these kind of industries are mainly very male-centric, if you ask me, if you're looking at in terms of the gender portion, right? And you see more female going into accountancy and the finance part. And I think this is where we need to draw that balance.
Yeah. And I think that is correct. And I think what we also need is more role models. So you need to make people aware that it is an option for them to take that route. Right. Like mostly in leadership, where do you find females? In HR. Yeah. Why are they in HR? Why are they not CIOs, CEOs, whatever? Why HR?
Correct.
Yeah, I think in order to get beyond that, and the US government right now, as you know, the current administration is very focused on DEIA. We have an A because we include accessibility. And really accessibility is just including those the infrastructure component to ensure that the disabled demographic is accounted for. So it's really inclusivity, but we focus on accessibility because it focuses on accessibility. But to my point, the US government is looking at it, and really I relay this because I'm part of that team, right? We look at it more programmatically. And so I think to look at it from a strategic perspective, to have certain goals, not only in the area of diversity and the hiring phase, but also have goals in the sustainability phase. So things like in the performance reviews, in the pay raises, in the awards, and measure those goals. Because you got to measure things to make sure you know where you need to address things within your organization. So I do think that that is an approach. That's the approach because the US government is over 1 million people across the whole government into different, subdivided into different agencies. And so my agency itself, the FAA, has a strategic plan with somebody in charge of and accountable for that strategic plan as far as DEIA is concerned. And so that person, that individual is responsible for reporting on the progress and for leading efforts to continue that progress. One thing that the US government has done on the hiring side recently is even do away with looking at salary history, because if you think of that, that's actually a hidden way to continue biases. Because if you got somebody, for example, a female, since we're talking about the female population in the aviation industry, you may have always been at the lowest scale because you always ran into a glass ceiling in your company. And so if, to give you your next job, I look at your salary history and say, oh, I'll give you a little more than what you're making, we're continuing that bias, right? And so in the US government now, with the current administration, you can't ask for a salary history when you're hiring somebody. You know, it pays what it pays. And that's what the job's gonna pay. So no matter what demographic you belong to, if you get the job, you're getting paid a certain amount. Of course, you can negotiate within a band, but that's what it's gonna pay. So I think those are the kinds of things that need to be structured into a company to build long-term sustainability of diversity.
We talked about diversity, and as mentioned, diversity has different angles and a lot very variant. Just for our discussion, if we touched about gender diversity, female and such. You mentioned about around 16% getting into a senior management role in airlines, and that's a number that is being proven by IATA in 2022 report, and 6% at the CXO level within the airlines. Pilots globally is around 5 to 6%, but even if we talk about STEM, which you mentioned is like around 14 to 15% of STEM-based organization. So we looked at the top, we looked at the bottom. So there is always a gap, and Chris, you very nicely touch upon some of the gender gap in terms of compensations and so forth. One is entering into the industry. One is within the industry, the gap. Is there anything else that could lead to this sudden gap? And we are not talking about 30, 70%. We are talking about less than 20 and 80% kind of a rate.
I think with us,
Is our industry too new?
I think it starts from, like I said, from the education part of things. You know, like typically in the airline, you have the pilots. People always see pilots being men, being male, right? But if we start educating from young and said, look, it's okay, and it's fine if you're a female and you want to become a pilot, you know, we should be encouraging them. And it starts from that itself, to build that talent pool that eventually during recruitment, we will have a good spread of talents, right? And I think it's the opportunities given at the very beginning, even in entry into specific education streams and so on, it should be open and not very much just biased to a certain specific demographics.
I think it's just not the entry level, it's within the system, what initiatives and how we focus on those initiatives. Right? Let's move. The next very strong part of the diversity is the culture. And here I see in my panel, we have highly talented from Europe market, US, and now in US market, and in 20 plus years in Asia market. How do you bring the diversity of cultural aspect? Because right now, most of the companies are global companies. Workforce is global. What do you see a similar trend between industry, aviation industry versus other industry, and different region as such? And as an inclusive leader, what are the thought process when you have a team of 10 people and maybe 1 or 2 are very specific from one region and rest are from other regions?
You want to? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it's, lost my train of thought. You go first.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and pick up while you're thinking about your train of thought. I'll give you a second to think. Again, you know, I do think that one of the things about being an inclusive leader is to make sure that you're proactive, and it's going to take out-of-the-box thinking, right? So I want to just give an example, if you don't mind, of something I saw. I was in Hyderabad actually last year. I visited a US company, and it addresses this point very well by example. It's a US company that has a production facility out. They created a greenfield facility out in the middle of nowhere. It was a village area, a lot of villages around, but nothing else. And they were struggling for workforce because they pretty much hired every male in the area. And the company said, we need more. And they kept trying to attract people from other regions. Nobody would come. And then they decided, well, why don't we tap into the female workforce? And again, they put a program to it, right? And they focused on it. But it's a very big effort. Because to do that, again, talking to Moushumi's point, cultures in different parts of the world. This is a US company working in India, having to understand that in that culture, a lot of the families didn't want their girls going into this type of work. They were to stay home and help the mother and take care of the fields and things like that. And they were not to go to some company and work for this company and bring home a paycheck. So the company had a lot of educating to do in the villages. But then they found that they got a large population of women in this company, and now it's up to a pretty significant population. It's over 20%. And now they're starting to move into the supervisory ranks. So they now have to take on training for their own people because they've got so many male individuals in the company that they don't want to lose. And so they have to train them on the cultural sensitivities of having a female supervisor. It's working quite well because the supervisory population is growing, the female supervisory population. I was really impressed. I was there a year ago, and when I saw this, I couldn't believe how many female local people were working in this factory. And some of them were wearing the supervisor shirts. And when I happened to walk through the factory, one of them actually had the Employee of the Month award because her picture was on the wall. And they had a party for her and stuff like that. And it was just impressive. And again, I just give you that example because it shows that you have to build an ecosystem. It's not just, I want to hire more and tell HR, I want to hire people of every demographic. It's not just that. It's a broader effort.
Yeah, it is. And I think what it also shows is what you nicely mentioned, is that sometimes it needs like a situation, a crisis where you need to be creative, where you need to have a different approach to things. Like you can't take the usual route. The usual route would have been just to hire more men.
Yep.
But because they weren't there, you had to find a different setup. You have to go a different route. You have to look at different options. And I think that always opens new opportunities. And I think what we need to do is think about those opportunities and be creative without having the need, so that we can create better teams with more different perspectives without, we're recognizing the need that we need to have more creativity and more diversity. And I think that's a very important fact, because for us, I mean, we're opening offices across the globe because we think that people want to buy from people that are similar to them. So that Americans want to buy from Americans. They prefer Americans over buying from Germans or buying from Asians or buying from other nationalities, because they talk different, they have different experiences, they like different sport teams, whatever. So it's like, I think your experience and your background is what drives you forward, and we need to be conscious and make the effort to be creative and just look for different ways of moving into the future.
Well, thank you. I want to change the focus a little bit. We were talking a little bit within the aviation industry. And here we are, aviation industry supporting the full population, the global population in terms of transportation. So we are not just within aviation, but what we project outside the industry. And we have a great example from the airlines, Yin May. What I want to hear, a thought for you is, you being the B2C, the end customer reach, how as a company you project this inclusive culture within the company to your end customer. And I'm just give an example. Last week actually, I was in one of our customers' office and Vietnam Airlines, and I was flipping through their in-flight magazine, and I saw an editor's page which talks about inspiring women, and it talks about the movies that they have selected for next month, which are female leading or female director to celebrate International Women's Day. And this is a message that's going to their passengers, their end users. So tell us about airlines specific, what they are driving.
I would tell you this, right? It is important because at the end of the day, consumers are very important to us, right? At Malaysia Aviation Group, we have this belief, customer is our center of gravity. So whatever that concerns the customer, literally, is what that we take into consideration as well, or rather, we take them as the North Star, and whatever that concerns them, we will need to address that. So take an example of that, right? Just last year, we actually, in view of International Women's Day, Malaysia Airlines had always had a little mascot. It's called Pilot Parker, right? So last year, we actually, in line with International Women's Day, we introduced Pilot Polly. Yeah. So it is to show that, look, a woman can be a pilot as well. Right, and this was literally communicated to consumers, right? And similarly, last year, we also introduced a new safety video that literally was showing the diverse community, not just of Malaysians, but also of our passengers. So in that safety video, if you guys have a chance, Google it up. Yeah, it's Malaysia Airlines' new safety video, as simple as that. We have casts from as young as 3, 4, 5 years old, right up to the 60 and 70 in terms of age. We also have diverse in terms of their ethnicity, the race, and even their nationality, and even in terms of what do they do. Yeah, so that is actually an example for us to show to our consumers that, not just that we are doing it internally in terms of our hiring, in terms of our employee, but also in terms of our representation to the consumers. Because we do know that when we track this with consumers, the Generation Zs, they are about 90% of them they literally said that in the data, right? And these are very clearly data-driven decisions that to them, a company is that respects diversity and inclusivity is what they will very likely to buy from. So we are all guided by consumers at the end of the day. So yes, to that question, we do want to project that diversity to our consumers.
Very good, thank you. And so you mentioned about Generation Z. So we don't talk about millennium these days. Yeah, we are already moved to the next generation. Yes. So it lines up to the IT sector of aviation industry. And we have people as our colleagues who are 15, 20, 30 years experience in aviation. And then there are certain verticals of aviation where new workforce is coming. It's coming everywhere, but the percentage of new workforce that's coming, mainly on the IT side. How does the inclusive leaders get along to bring this workforce? And especially, and this is a question, if I had asked in 2019, I probably would have got a different answer, but 3 years in COVID, distance working, remote leadership, and so forth, how do you motivate the team?
I think that is a very good question, and I think that actually, you mentioned it, the pandemic changed a lot. Yes. The new workforce, the young people, they work different, and they don't work less. They work. They're eager, they want to work, they want to deliver things, they want to move things along, but they have a different perspective on how they want to work and when they want to work, and it doesn't matter that much anymore. They don't want to work from 9 to 5. They might want to work from 7 to 9 and then go off and do something else, and then from 4 to 8 and then do something, and then again between 11 and midnight, just to match the times that they work and when they work and where they work to the rest of their lives. And that is something that we are now enabling more and more. So you can work from, Europe is quite easy on that because of the working laws. So you can work in Spain, you can work in Scandinavia, or you can work in Germany. It doesn't matter because of the European Union. That makes that quite easy. And a lot of our people actually take that option and work from Fuerteventura, an island, Spanish island, for a couple of weeks. And then they work during the day, and in the evening they go surfing because that's the way that they want to work.
And managers and leaders are accepting this trend.
Yeah, and that's the point, that our people had to learn that actually working remotely is good. And it is possible, and people work more if they work remotely. Like during the pandemic, working from home, I think our people worked a lot more than they worked before the pandemic. They also had overtime there, but it was even more because you don't differentiate private life and work that much anymore. But I think it's also important on how you present your software and what you do in your software. Like one part of our software is actually trying to enable that also for the workforce in aviation, is that the rostering system enables you to enter preferences. And that is also something that we experience as a big change between men working and females working, because still the females usually take more care about family matters and kids and whatever. So if you can enter their preferences and you can say, I need every Tuesday afternoon off because I need to take my kid to swimming lessons or whatever, that enables a different way of working and enables more people to actually work in aviation than they did before. Because you're now taking their private life into consideration when you roster shifts for them. So it's not only the way that our workforce work, but it's also the way that we enable our systems to enable the aviation workforce to work. So it has both sides.
Thank you. Chris, in terms of government and we talk about FAA or civil aviation or any government-related aviation initiative, how are they taking it? Are they still stereotype about the old system, and what's going on?
No, actually, I think the way Uschi phrased it was really well, because that's what the government's having to do too. I think the key word in everything that I would pick out of what you said is learn. We have to be a learning culture as leaders of organizations. Learn from everywhere. I learn from my kids. I got 2 millennial kids. I learn all the time how they deal with things, because that's an important part of understanding your workforce is how do you deal with something differently. Again, millennials and younger, right now, at least in the US, I think I saw a number recently, it looks like by 2030, it'll be over 70% of our workforce will be people who are currently millennials and younger. So it's pretty much, that's the new generation. They are the ones who will be charged with running the country in the future, at least in the US. I know each country has slightly different demographics. But the important thing is to learn what's important to that demographic, no matter what culture you're looking at, whether you're looking at women or different races or different colors or different generations. What's important to that generation? How do they learn? It goes back to what we said in the beginning, right? Recognize and understand that there are differences and use those differences to your advantage. People don't have to change the way they think or change the way they are. Use what they have and what they bring to the team to the greatest advantage. And with millennials coming up today, the aviation industry is going to change. So there's a diversity problem that the aviation industry itself needs to get used to, and we, as the regulator, have been struggling with this because of our workforce in the regulator. We have people with 30 to 40 years service still working, right? And the industry itself is changing. To Uschi's point, a lot of people coming into the industry now in advanced air mobility and uncrewed aerial systems and things like that are from the IT industry. They're not even from aviation. So even if, irrespective of their age or their gender or anything else, they're not even from the aviation industry. So they bring a diverse thought process just from coming from a different industry and integrating these different industries into what we considered our industry, our legacy industry. The industry is, the growth profile is in two different directions. One is the legacy industry, aviation is growing with all the, I mean, you just saw the new purchase in India, right? 470 airplanes. But then the breadth is also growing with AAM and UAS and commercial space and everything else. And so we just have to learn. We have to learn what's important and what makes things work. So we have to be a learning culture. The industry needs to be a learning industry.
Thank you, Chris. Before I throw my last question, I open up any questions from the audience. There. Luann, behind.
Philip from Lufthansa, I have a question. We talk about diversity, which is also a topic dear to our heart. Nevertheless, it's a very difficult answer. What is diversity, right? And there was rightfully said so today, the amount of women is maybe not to the satisfaction. At the same time, I believe 6 men sitting on the panel is just as diverse from a different perspective, maybe not as obvious. So I try to ask myself how to spot diversity. I try to rephrase it in a way, if people who are together share psychological safety in order to phrase, do whatever they feel like, and Chris, you rightfully said, despite their biases that they have and their counterparts might have you had, any of you, a concrete example where you were able to create such kind of environment of psychological safety that has significantly improved in the end collaboration by all the different diversity, be it gender, culture, personal interests, whatever that might be? Have you any best practice which you would like to share and say, this could also help your organization or you as a leader in your team, in your organization, etc.?
I think, well, the little thought that I could add to that, my 2 cents, is I think first of all, as leaders, we need to, like I mentioned, it's intentional, and we need to show it and lead by example. That's number 1. To be able to offer, give all your staff the comfort and a safe environment that whatever background they come from, whatever social or demographics, right, their comments and their feedback and their contributions are valued. I think that sets the stage. So that the rest of them could see that, you know, it's a safe environment for them to voice out anything that they want to say, so that they don't feel like, you know, I'm constrained and I shouldn't be talking, you know, if I'm only 20 years old, because there are people who are 50 years old in the same room. So giving that opportunity, making it very visible is one example, giving a safe environment. And I think secondly, it's very much to do with, it has to be consistently executed. It's not something that you just call it flavor of the month and say, oh, this month we're all going to be focusing on diversity and inclusivity. And then next month, everybody forgets about it. It is not, unfortunately. It needs to be drilled in every single day. And also, to be honest, putting it in the KPI is what matters, and to make sure that it is then executed at every single level, because it's the entire organization to keep it sustainable throughout. Yeah. It's not going to be, I'm going to be honest, it's not easily achievable. It's not something that you can do overnight, or over 1 month, or 1-2 years even, right? It is a conscious effort to continuously enforce it through and make sure that the structure and make sure the people are always continuously being supported, giving that safe environment that everybody respect each other, and it's literally a very good, conducive environment for everyone. That's as much as I could add to that, yeah, because that's what we do to be able to get people to be able to contribute. Because I always find that 1 + 1 could go to 5 or could go to 10. And I go back to that equation. When I hear all these comments coming from everybody, when it's a brainstorm session or whatnot, it really excites me, because when I see contributions coming, it just gives me a lot of different perspectives. And it really adds to that. Yeah, hope that helps.
So we have a couple of, you asked for examples, and so we're running out of time, so I'll just really say this quick to give Uschi a chance to say something. I mentioned earlier that the FAA has an agency plan. So if you just Google the FAA diversity plan, we have two things. One is called the Special Emphasis Program. The other one's National Employee Forums. And basically what these are those safe environments like Yin May is talking about, where we give people the opportunity. Everything is an experiment in progress. It's a controlled experiment because nobody knows. So you asked for concrete examples. I would say those are a couple of examples that are in work, experiments in progress, so to speak, that we feel strongly about and we are supporting wholeheartedly by FAA leadership. So if you just Google our strategic plan, US government, FAA, diversity, DEIA strategic plan, there's some detail about that in there which might help.
Yeah. I think, thank you for the question, because when you said it, there was a panel of 6 men sitting up here, but why do you come to the conclusion that that's not diverse? They might come from totally different backgrounds, and that is correct. I mean, we might be 6 women sitting up here, and still, it's not just all females finished. It could be from all different areas of the world, and I think my important part of, my company, we don't have a program to say, this is what we need to do, this is exactly what we can measure or stuff like that. I don't know if we're too small for that, but it's something that I will look into. But for me, what is important is to give people a voice, to be able to give them the ability to make themselves heard and to listen, and to do that, as Yin May correctly said, on a continuous basis, not just kind of like have the month of diversity and that's it, but to really always have the ability to say, it's like, you're listened to, I value your opinion, and I value your opinion, I value your opinion, I value your opinion, because they're different, and just really, give people the ability to be listened to.
And I'll just add to that, right? To a certain extent, sometimes you would need to force it through, right? In a meeting, you typically find somebody which are less vocal. So unfortunately or fortunately, you just need to give that person, call them out and say, hey, what do you think? So that allows them to have that courage to say something. So it's very intentional. So that's why sometimes you just need to force it through. And after a while, they kind of gain that confidence. They kind of get that, feel that, hey, it's okay, I can be saying something. And even if it's wrong, I won't be reprimanded, it's a safe environment. And I think over time, hopefully, then it will be then instituted as a culture.
Thank you. So at least within our panel and audience, hopefully, we agree that inclusiveness is a trait in leadership which we have to emphasize more and more. And I just want to conclude it and just want one sentence or one phrase for the future leaders, and you being the current leaders, what one thing you would focus to bring up that inclusive leadership for the next round? Just one phrase. Do you want to sponsor a diverse candidate, or do you want to have the speak of culture? One phrase, which you'll say, this is it, I will advocate it.
For me, the most important thing is that I would want my future leaders to be exposed to diversity, and to make the experience to live in different countries, to experience different backgrounds, and to work with people of different cultures.
Thank you.
I think I would say something similar, and that is and I said this earlier, to be learners, to never stop learning. You can always learn from your environment, from the people around you, and to continue to learn and grow and make changes to yourself and the way you look at things based on what you learn, and be willing to make those changes.
Well, I think I just go back to my one-liner, right? 1 + 1 can be 5, and it's up to you to make it 10.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I just want to conclude with, I forgot, I didn't introduce myself. So 20 plus years in aviation industry, and I am also the board member for Women in Aviation. I have another board member sitting on the front row, Luann, and you can see our logo there. And just to inform you, this month we are starting first ever in Singapore, inclusive leadership mentorship program. This is the first batch we are starting end of this month. So hope to hear back from you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.